Hi everyone, it's Sue Plumb here to share a painting process video with you for StencilGirl. Today I am paying tribute to a wonderful Australian artist by the name of Clair Bremner, and I'll put one of Claire's works in the corner there. You can see it there. Isn't it gorgeous? And this is the work of Claire's that is actually inspiring me for my piece today. The current theme at StencilGirl is called Pastiche, and what Pastiche is a work of art that imitates the style or character of another artist, and it's designed to be a celebration or a tribute to the original work. Now, I've long been a fan of Claire's work. She does amazing nature-inspired pieces. She has a beautiful use of colour and form, and it has a real whimsical quality to it. And I've really wanted to have a go at painting in this style for a while, but I was a little bit overwhelmed that I wouldn't measure up. But this theme gave me a good kick in the pants and gave me a chance to try it out. So what I actually did was I gathered together a stack of my StencilGirl stencils there, and I just leafed through them looking for some shapes that reminded me of Claire's work. I wasn't sure whether I was going to use all of the stencils at this stage, but I just gathered them together so I had them on hand to choose from as I went along. Now, Claire's original work that I showed you there was actually created using acrylic paints on paper, so I decided to follow along with the same method. I've actually got a sheet of watercolour paper there, which is A3 sized, and I gathered together a whole stack of acrylic paints as well. So there are a few different brands of paints I'm working with. I've got some Montmartre dimensional paint, which is actually one of my favourite kinds of paints to use. I've got some Dina Wakley acrylic paints, and I've also got a Kaisercraft one there as well. I also gathered together a stack of basic tools. Again, I wasn't sure what I was going to use from this stack, but I thought it was better off to have them at hand. So I've got a brayer, I've got a silicone spatula, I've got a range of brushes there for me to choose from. I just wasn't sure what I was going to use. So I started out there with one of the Dina Wakley paints, which was the colour Night, which I absolutely adore because I really wanted to get some dark colour down on the background, because you'll note in a lot of Claire's work that she has a lot of dark and shadow going on in the background of her work. So I just used my very fancy paint palette there, which is actually the lid from an ice cream container, and I popped some paint on there, and then I just used my small brayer just to roll some of that dark paint across the page. And then I switched tools for the next colour. So I've got that turquoisey colour that I'm working with there, and this tool that I'm using, this silicone spatula, it's actually from Kmart. It comes from the kitchen section, but it makes a brilliant paint spreader on paper. So yeah, that's just me using my $1 silicone spatula from Kmart. So you can see when you look at Claire's work that she actually works in sort of colour blocks. They're these loose sort of patches of colour around the page, and you can see that she layers them one on another, on another, on another. So that was what I was doing here. I was just gradually building up these colour layers, because this is one of the tools that Claire uses to get a lot of depth into her pieces, is the layering of colour in the background. So you can see I'm working through a bit of a spectrum in cool tones there. I'm started with that really sort of dark navy black colour, which is that night colour. I've got a couple of different shades from the sort of blue-green family. And then I went in with this green colour and my brush, and rather than continuing on using the spatula, I just used a small flat paintbrush just to put some brush marks on it. And you can see that already this piece is starting to develop depth, because I've got those layers of paint that are building up over one another. So then it was time to bring in some stencils. So this first stencil that I started with is called Bouquet Greenery, and it actually has some like large leaf designs on it. But given that I was working in a scale that was A3 and these large leaves, I thought that I could use them sort of as tree shapes in my background, because you'll note that Claire uses a lot of sort of, not abstract as such, but they're a bit sort of abstract shapes and designs to represent the different plants in her nature-inspired pieces. So I used this Bouquet Greenery, and I used it with the Naples yellow paint, which is one of my very favourite colours from Montmartre. and I am just using a large sort of, well, it's not really large, sorry, a flat paintbrush there, and I'm just using a stippling technique, which is where I sort of load up the tip of my brush with paint, and then I'm using like a dotting technique, which is called stippling, just to get the paint through the stencil and down onto the page. Now, this is a really good technique to use with this particular kind of paint, given that it is a dimensional paint, because it does leave some texture on your page. Very subtle texture, but it's there. So once I had dried off, you will see that I am drying off as I go through this process. I have sped it up so it's not quite so boring for you to watch paint dry. But you will see that I am drying off each layer before I am going in with the next, because I don't want any of these colours to mix. I want all of the colours to be quite distinct and recognisable on the page. So going in with my second stencil. Now the second stencil I am using here is called Playful Petals, and you can see that it's got a few different flowers on that one stencil. It's a 6x6 stencil. And I have actually masked off just one small area, one small set of petals in the corner there, which I actually thought looked like little bushes, like little grassy bushes. And I wanted to put some of those into my layers. So I just used some washi tape just to mask off the corner there. And then I grabbed the dusky pink paint because I thought that would provide another nice contrast. It sort of has a bit of a purpley undertone, so it does sort of lean towards the cool family there that I was working with. And I used that stencil, I moved it around the page I used the same technique, the same stippling technique to get the paint through the stencil, and I just moved it around the page just to start creating some of those intricate layers, building on the colours that I already had from the background. And again, I'm going to dry them off just to make sure that they don't muddy with any of the things that were to come. Now, the next stencil I am working with here, well, I'm working with part of the stencil because, again, I worked with small areas of each stencil because I was looking for very specific shapes and forms for this page. So this one is called Inspired by Frida, and it's actually a Frida Kahlo stencil. It's got a number of different icons on it, but I was particularly looking at that sort of leafy branch there with the long sort of slender leaves. And I was actually working with white at this point. I thought that I needed to start bringing some more light into my foreground. So I've got a number of sort of dark and sort of mid-tone colours going on in my background, and wanted to start introducing some more light colour just to bring some things to more to the foreground. So using that Frida inspired stencil, I've added that sort of leafy branch on the right hand side. I'm also adding one on the left hand side there with the white paint. And then I wasn't happy, so I went back and I actually added an extra branch on that right-hand side just to sort of cover up some more of that dark in the background, because I like the way that the dark colour is showing through those white leaves. It helps to give the piece depth. Now, while I had the white paint out, I did want to put some more white right down the front in the foreground there, as I said. And this little stencil that I'm working with here, it's actually a 4x4, and it's called Maidenhair Fern. Now, this stencil comes complete, but you actually sort of cut the middle of it out so that you are left with a stencil and the mask that's from the inside of it as well. Now, I wasn't actually using the mask today. I was just looking for that outline stencil. And I really love the rounded leaves of this stencil. I really love the shapes of it, and it very much reminded me of some of the shapes that Claire uses in her work, so I thought it would be a perfect match. And you can see I'm just creating some little sort of bushes using it down the front there, just to bring some more, as I said, to the front of the piece. Again, I was using that stippling technique, which I find is really effective for getting acrylic paint through a stencil and minimizing bleed under the stencil. I find if you try and paint back and forth with a brush through the stencil, quite often some of the bristles may slip under the edge of the stencil and you won't get quite a crisp image with it. So once I had that done, that was all of the white that I was planning to add to the page. And I looked at some of the areas on the page and I thought that I needed to go back to dark again. So the next colour I was going to work with was a deep blue. Oh no, sorry. I'm going back and adding some more pink. That's the first thing I did. I went and painted some pink sort of randomly on the edge there. And then I decided that large white space in the middle there, I thought it just needed to be blocked in just a little bit. It was a little bit too wide for my liking. So I just brushed in some pink that I had mixed with the white just to tone it down a little because I didn't want it quite as dark as the bushes that I'd painted in. And then I was feeling quite happy with the colour balance and I dried it off. Now, one of the things you're going to see very shortly is my video actually cut out for this and I wasn't able to film my entire process. So I've actually put a little bit of a video that I filmed going over the entire piece and I will talk you through the last things that I did to finish this off. So this final stencil I used is called Daisy 6 and it's got some beautiful little daisies on it. Again, I used washi tape to mask off one of the daisies and then I went back to a dark blue. This colour is called Marine in the Dina Wakley paints and I moved it around the page just to block in some flowers in different spots and add a different shape to the overall background. So you can see my video is cut out now and now I am just videoing the finished piece. So all I did to finish off this piece was I used a black Sharpie pen. I also used my white water-based Sharpie and I also used Stabilo All Pencil. And all I did was go and add some lines and crosses and dots and mark making over the top of the shapes that I had already stenciled on with the acrylic paint. It was fairly easy to do and I am really, really happy with how this piece came together and I just hope that Claire would think that I did her beautiful pieces justice with this. I've really enjoyed sharing this with you today. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any comments for me about anything that I've done, feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.